powerful. You fight against our rights. You say we all lead lives you can't respect. But you're just frightened. You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked. Funny, just this once, you're correct.
So this video caused an uproar in America. The San Francisco Gay Men's Choir have said, wait for it, they were only joking. It was satire. They don't really mean, as the lyrics say, that they would like to convert your children.
1 year later.
We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it. We'll convert your children.
No such thing as someone else's child. No such thing as someone else's child. Our nation's children are all our children.
These are kids. These are our kids. They belong to all of us.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
California Teachers Association is one of the most powerful unions in the country, and it is purely an organ of the Democratic Party. Recently, the union held a conference to discuss how to indoctrinate school children without their parents' knowledge. One first-grade teacher called Blair Wyatt explained that it's best to hold meetings for gender identity clubs during lunchtime so their parents never know.
Yes, that lunchtime is kind of that sweet spot where the kids don't need to come earlier, stay late, and kind of eliminates a little bit of that parent interaction if there are kids who would like to attend, but maybe their parents are unaware that they're interested in participating or unaware that they're out at school. So if you can get it to happen at lunch, that seems like a really good structure to protect the kids' identities and protect and allow them to attend.
Someone's gotta teach them not to hate. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children.
Psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. But the first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students. The disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to.
Okay. Welcome to another Wednesday Night Live. So, happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day to everyone. I had an excellent day. I hope you did as well. I smoked a couple of large barbecue short ribs. I was extremely happy to enjoy that day off, and I hope you used yours well. I hope you got to see some good fireworks, and everything was safe. So over the weekend, and really starting last week, really starting years ago, I have been talking to people about the Save Our Children piece, and in particular, this latest list of developments with the group that was marching in the street and talking, chanting for themselves that we're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children, and you may have seen the other portion of that was done a year ago from the Gay Men's Chorus. I assume by now that has made it to you. If you have not seen that, then by all means let me know. I have it on cue and I can put it up. But they basically did a chorus video song a year ago saying that you're right. And that's what I put at the beginning of the ticker. Some of you may have come on late, but I'll give you a small taste of it here. Actually, I almost played the intro again. That would be bad.
You think we're sinful? You fight against our rights. You say we all lead lives you can't respect. But you're just frightened. You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked. Funny, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it. We'll convert your children. Someone's gotta teach them not to hate. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children.
And that's the gist of how it goes. Now, what I played, there's this YouTube channel, Nimbo, that I discovered, had a clip of where they saved me the time of having to put it all together, but they also sent me on the rabbit hole of looking up the names on the board of director list or the board list for the Gay Men's Choir or Chorus. And because what they did is they exposed many of those names, and that was those cubes that you saw floating up in the screen. Many of them were on pedophile lists. So the argument from Gay Men's Chorus at the time was that it was all satire. Now, what you may say to yourself, and this is the reason, because I went in and found some more names on there. You can have fun down this rabbit hole. I am not going to broadcast those names because some of them don't have pictures associated with them, but some of them are pretty unique names. It's not like they were John Doe's, and they did show up on that list. However, I don't, in the risk that any one of them might be misidentified, I don't want to go down that road. But I can tell you, it's an interesting road to go on. The National Child Registry is available to everybody. You can simply go in there and pick names. Now, on the Rumble version of this video, I pulled the actual board of directors list that originally was up when they dropped that video, because they pulled it down, which is why when it was exposed and it became news a year ago, I wanted to, I wanted to go back and look at it so I could look at those names for myself. And I found out that was pulled and a lot of names had changed. They did a lot of flipping around, and that sort of added validity to what was exposed, because if they're not pedophiles and everything's okay, then you come out and you clear their names. You don't allow someone to accuse someone who's innocent of being a pedophile, especially if they're a part of your organization. So there's two routes that you go if something like that happens. One of those routes is you come out and defend your people and say, no, that's a different person with the same name. Or you say, oh, crap, that's him. And you take the names off the website, rearrange everything, and hopefully pretend that it goes away. And it probably, unfortunately, would have gone away if it weren't for our friends who jumped into the streets 1 year later. And as they went to make the case that that this was just satire and that it was not meant to, because they got away with that case for the most part at the time. People thought they were just poking fun at the opposing side, and that was that, and that there was no real agenda to get your kids and convert your kids. But there is an agenda to convert your kids. It's these people in that video probably aren't even aware that it's an actual agenda, but it is. And the fact of the matter is, if you're going to say that it's satire and it's not really true and that's not really what you believe, then a year later, this shouldn't be happening. And so the idea that they just made this video in jest is ridiculous. A year later, when they're marching in the streets, these people, this is not satire that you just saw right there. That was not satire. Howdy, Mern. Mern from Jersey, representing. I did enjoy Independence Day. I love Independence Day. I am a big barbecuer, and there was a part of me that wanted to start a side channel for barbecue. I may still do it one day if I just don't know how many tasks I could take on without exploding. So in an effort to keep this channel on schedule, we're going to hold off on that for a while. But good to hear from you, Mern, for sure. Always good. Mern is one of our Convention of States people, our Article 5 advocates, district captain over in New Jersey. So always glad to see you aboard. And now, just to get back to this pedophilia stuff, I wanted to cover a lot of this last week, but I had Mike Arnold on, and whenever I have Mike Arnold on, I end up going a little astray because I just enjoy talking to him, and I like to pick his brain and have him take questions. And keep in mind, folks, as always, if anybody has an Article 5 question, if you're wondering, why does he have that Article 5 thing sitting there? Like, what is that? What's this all about? Convention of States. I will interrupt anything I'm doing to answer Article 5 and Convention of States questions at all times. So keep that in mind as well. But to get back to the pedophile thing, these people, these Marxists have been at it trying to separate families for a very long time. Now, the latest iteration of that is transgenderism. They thought gay marriage was going to set the world afire and that would be the successful move, but it wasn't. For the most part, people were like, there was some pushback from the Christian community, but for the most part, people were like, this is not a fight that's worth splitting the nation. If you're going to sin, from a Christian point of view, if you're going to sin, that's not, everyone can name sins that they sin, and in the end, it didn't do what they thought it would do. So they moved on and said, all right, well, if that's not going to divide you all and get you all turned against each other, then we're going to let men into the women's bathroom. And so the fireworks began. Now, of course, other parts of trying to pull apart families are the disassociation with religion, right? The pulling of civics out of classrooms so no one knows their rights. All these little tactics have gone on to try and dismantle the American system, right? And the transgenders are just the latest part of it. They don't even know that they're doing this. They don't even know that they're minions, basically. And I don't use that as an excuse to forgive them, because they're drastically wrong. And if you're going to be drastically wrong, then you need to own that. You need to own that. And so in the end, when we look at not just the transgender community, the gay community, atheists, and everybody else, it's our position to hold the line. Now, we draw the line at our kids. That's where we draw the line. That's where Budweiser lost, Bud Light lost its crown. Anheuser-Busch took it on the chin. That's where, multiple different companies, Target, right, and the rest. This is where the beatings commence commercially when you start going after children. Because no one tolerates. You go now. You've got what you've done with it. Basically, is you've got Mama Bear now, who the government has labeled a domestic terrorist, and she's sitting there now. Most Mama Bears, not all. I know there are some active and incredibly vocal mamas out there before all of this stuff started. But after this started, once it was clear that it was the children that they were going after, and this really marks 2020, I would say, once moms got a peek into what's going on in their children's classroom, I think that's when it all became crazy. Now, it's important to understand that they've been coming after our kids far longer than 2020. That started, and it's not, when I say they, again, I don't mean transgenders. They're the newest minions. There literally are like 10 of them, right? Real ones, right? We were talking about like 0.6 of the population. But they're trying to demasculinize men, right? That's what that movement's really about. But it also serves the purpose of splitting the family, right? If you can get this kid to identify as some weird shit like there's furries out there and all this stuff. My daughter tells me laughing about all the weird stuff kids do. If you can get them to do this weird stuff that their parents just simply can't relate to, then tell them their parents are, your parents, they're not going to understand you. They're going to get angry. They're going to hate you. Then you start to create that wedge, right? It's no different than the tactics that were used many years ago. I remember watching the documentary. The name is escaping me. If someone knows it, put it in the comments. It was. I think it was The Final Account, where the director had realized that the children of Nazi Germany were all seriously elderly right now and didn't have many years left. So he did a documentary to get their last account. And one of the things that these now grandparents were saying was that, when they went to school, they were taught Nazism. And the one guy was like, my father didn't like it very much. He hated it. And then the interviewer asked him, well, who did you side with? And he was like, well, I was mad at my father for hating it. I sided with the school. And the reason that happens is because when the school has the kid, they're preempting the father's attempts to talk common sense. And they do this to you too. So for you, your children, your grandchildren, it's important to understand that. Now, not every teacher is like this, but there are teachers like this in every school, and there are in virtually every school. And more importantly, those setting the curriculum are very much like this, with the exception of those districts where parents have already taken over the school board. But the beauty of all this is that since 2020, they are losing. And they are losing big time. And the reason they're losing is because they can no longer operate in the shadows. And that was a necessary component in order to be able to pull off what they're doing. It's necessary. Kathy Burns, how are you, Kathy? On YouTube, exactly right. Says, don't mess with our kids. Yeah, that's it. When our kids are complaining we're acting like conspiracy theorists, we explain that our fight wasn't for us, but for them and their future. And that's how everyone should be looking at this. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's about your kids. It's about your grandkids. The world that these people are trying to create is a dystopian future. The fact that they're not going to the fact that minions like the coconuts and doo-doo-doos in that video, the fact that they're not going to understand this until the boot crashes down doesn't make it okay for you. In the end, your children are who they're focused on because they know they're not going to turn you. They know they're not going to convince you. So many people are like, I will not comply. I will not comply. They don't really expect you to. They're not trying, they're patient. What they want are your children. What they want are your children to be loyal to the state. They want your children to be loyal to the mindset that they are creating. They want your children to be into these pronouns. Every divisive thing that they can throw out there, they want your children all in on. Because that constant state of chaos makes them easy to control. And all you have to do is take whatever you want to implement. you just translate it into one of these coconuts, whatever minion group we're looking at, translate it in a way where they feel like they're being attacked and they need to activate, and they'll activate. They not only will accept your communism, they will feverishly fight for it in the streets. That's what they want. But what I'm seeing now, okay, and and now, for those that don't, I want to get into this movie. I didn't get to see it yet. If any of you have seen Sounds of Freedom, I want to hear about it. But it released yesterday. I'm going to talk about that too. But what I really want to make as the point of all of this is we're winning, and it doesn't feel like it, but we're winning. All right, and I've said this a million times. When I say there are no Marxists, obviously there are some. But look at all the people you see in the media, Hollywood, right? All of that. That's all of them. That's all of them. When I say they don't exist, I mean they don't exist in the grocery store. They don't exist. There are a handful of younger minions out there, a few leftover hippies who never figured it all out. But for the most part, that Gen Y, I guess it is, that really got slipped right under the radar. 2020, I don't know if it had the same impact on them that I feel that it had on Gen Z. All right, I hope it did. Right, but I think a lot of the late millennials and Gen Y folks really make up and even amongst them, they were not all, they're not all bought into this stuff either. But the ones that are, that's where you find them. I think is really in those two. So, but I would say Gen Z, and I try to get feedback from my daughter. I try to listen out, to others. Anyone putting out content from Gen Z who just to put the feelers out there and see where they're at. And I can tell you, I kind of like what I see from a lot of them. Like, there's a lot of examples of them, they're all in high school now, and there's a lot of examples of attempts to indoctrinate them and them catching it on camera and going viral with a mockery of a teacher. They had one in Huntington Beach the other day. Not the other day, it was about a week and a half ago. Math class, teacher puts on some woke pride video, right? And like everyone in the class, as soon as it was clear what they were watching, you just heard a collective in the class. And you just hear the kids mumbling and talking. You hear in the background, why are you showing this to kids? Like, why? This is math class. Ain't this supposed to? Like, they're seeing what we're seeing. And I think a large part of that is that, the parents that woke up and opened their eyes in 2020 now realize what's actually going on. And it comes down to this hidden stuff that they've been doing. And this is where it gets dubious. If you have to, if you're a teacher and there's anything that you have to hide from a parent, you're an epic fail. You're an epic fail. Hello, Norm Sanders. How are you? Paradise is in the house. Nice. All right. So, but that's the thing. If you have to hide anything from a teacher, from a parent, if you're a teacher, you have to hide it. You should not be working with children. Period. The idea, I took a little clip of the one guy in the ticker video where he was all, he vetoed a bill that would have given parents, the right to have the final say on what goes into the curriculum. Who else would have the final say? And the reason they don't want the parents to have the final say, right? And Tucker was doing the one piece where, he's showing the recording of a Zoom call that they were on where the teacher's saying, well, let's do the gender studies stuff at lunch so that this way, if for those kids whose parents disagree, we don't have to do it after school or before school, so they don't have to be in early or stay late, which would raise a flag and make a parent ask, why are they staying late, right? We don't want to have that conversation. Let's do it during lunch. Like, that's dubious stuff, folks. If you don't see that that's dubious, I don't know where to go with you. I don't know. I could take you to the water, right? But I can't make you drink. So over on Facebook, Norm says, I've been saying it for at least 10 years. They're after the children, he, she, he, her, whatever they call them today. Yeah, absolutely. We call them boys and girls, Norm. We don't care what they call them. We don't keep track of it. We don't pay attention to their new symbols and new characterizations and new classifications. We ignore all that. If we don't, we're doing it injustice. Giving it any acknowledgement gives it minimal legitimacy, and there is no legitimacy. There is no legitimacy. You know, it's so I got that shirt. You know, it says I identify as a conspiracy theorist. My pronouns are I told you, him, her, them, so, and it's true. And it's true. So Kathy says, dying to see that movie. Jack's currently listening to an interview with the guy who made it, and Jordan Peterson. He says it's excellent, which is why he's not listening to you now. All good. All good. I was watching some of those interviews as well. So, folks, if you go online, you should be able to see. Let me see. I'm going to try something new here. Watch the whole broadcast blow up. I'm going to try something new. Let me see if I can get you. Okay, so I am going to try and play the trailer for you for those that don't know what I'm talking about. It's a film made, another I believe Christian movie, because the production company was like Angel Productions, but like Nefarious, it's not that Christian movie where like they all come to Jesus at the end and the bad turn good. It's much more, you know. Well, it's fact. So it's a true story of a guy who wanted to help save children through this pandemic, this epidemic that we all know, at least my viewers all know, are going on, and couldn't get any help from the government. So he went on his own and started saving the kids. All right, let me see here. So I got nothing. It's supposed to be playing the video that I chose, but doesn't look like that's going to happen. So, but you can catch the video on YouTube. Just Sounds of Freedom. Look up the trailer. Not now, right? I got you now. But you can look up the trailer. It's a good trailer. I tried to get it loaded before I started the show, but that just didn't happen because my Wednesday nights are kind of hectic sometimes, and I'm working and I get out, I get done. Sometimes I can get done a little early. Sometimes it goes right to the wire. Sometimes it goes a little over, and I got to be up and ready at 5:30. So I try and get it done, but doesn't always come to fruition. Norm Sanders saw the movie, wasn't impressed. I think it's propaganda for us to eat up. That's a unique position. I have yet to hear that one. I know about 6 or 7 people that saw it yesterday. As far as propaganda, I mean, I don't know if you're saying there is not a pedophilia ring. That's insane. There absolutely is. That's not even questionable anymore. So I don't know if you're saying that this guy's experience was embellished or what happened, but please tell me you're not saying there's no pedophilia ring. That's insane. That I understand why people think that way, because they don't want to know it's true. I understand that, but that's the reason why a movie like this is so necessary. So I'm going to see it this weekend with my daughter. So I'll let you guys know on next Wednesday what my take from it was. But just from the trailer, I thought it looked pretty bad, like a pretty badass movie. And everything I've heard until Norm right now, until Norm. So just to be clear, so I don't peg Norm for something he's not. She's not saying that at all. All right. So he's saying, of course there is, right? So he just didn't. So his criticisms are just on the movie, not on, not on the fact that there's no pedophilia ring. I was going to say, I just want to make sure, Norm, that we were on the same page there, because if like there definitely is, right? And it's disturbing. And I understand why a lot of people don't want to acknowledge it. I get it, but we're past that, man. We should have always been past that. But like now, like people need to see it. They need to be horrified by it, and because that's what's going to get the collective action to be taken. And seeing these Christian movies, on a bigger note, like Nefarious was an outstanding film. It was an outstanding film. Now, I know there are some other Christian movies people are telling me to check out, but I'm with Steve Deese when he put together Nefarious, where he was saying, I told them if they wanted to come to Jesus moment at the end, it wasn't happening. And I understand exactly what he meant, because these movies need to be written for the non-believer. Not like the classic Christian movie is always written for the believer. And so, when I see things, I think even Christians at this point, when it just gets, it's not that it's cheesy that someone comes to Jesus. It's just those types of movies are kind of cheesy. like what was the one? With the teacher who was challenging the student, God is not dead, right? So the concept of the movie was good. The thought process was good. But anybody who didn't know how that movie was going to end before it started, is lying to themselves. Like anyone who was like, oh, the teacher is like anybody who did that is just lying to themselves. But like Nefarious was concerned Hollywood. You know why? Because they labeled it a horror flick, and there was nothing about that flick that should have been a horror flick. Psychological thriller, yes, but a horror flick, no. And why would they do that? Because if people go expecting a horror flick and don't get one, they're going to give it bad reviews. That's why. And it still killed it in the review department. Of course, like always, it killed it with the viewer, not with the critics, but whatever. I don't think anyone rationally looks like, Norm says he's a very conservative Christian. Mern, it's hard to imagine it's hard to imagine adults like kids. Yeah. Our minds can't understand the concept. Yeah, you're right. For us Christians, it's unthinkable to harm a child. It is, and it's unthinkable. But like, there's a willingness to believe that it happens, but there's not a willingness to believe that there's like a global freaking syndicate and like islands that, like, I know in one of the coming attractions, there's a few versions of it. One of them, he's saying, look, we all know about Epstein and his island. That's not the only island. and I'm sure Epstein, it wasn't like all going through Epstein and Epstein died and that was it. I am sure that vacuum got filled, if not splintered out into more. But the concept of that for an adult to wrap their head around is not easy. I concur with that completely, because it's so horrific. It's so horrific, and you feel so powerless against it. And like, I did that video. It's probably one of the top viewed videos I've ever done. It was right when the Facebook channel got monetized, and it was my first taste of monetization. And I was wondering, like, I thought they were going to like ban it or whatever, because I had been dealing with random shadow bans, and I'm like, oh, they're going to love this one. But I'm like, I have to do it. And it was just a collaboration video, a compilation video regarding CPS and their involvement, if you will, with the child sex trade. And that video made me like $700. I thought that I was going to like start making a lot of money on Facebook. And then as soon as Facebook realized that they had just paid me a decent amount of money, they were like, oh, hell no. And all of my videos went from tens of thousands of views to like 1,000, or, one of them started taking off on its own. This is a good story. It started taking off on its own. And just as they saw it was taking off, inexplicably, they held it back, put a notice on it, and said, we're not monetizing this video until we're done reviewing it. waited a week for it to get like 30,000 views or whatever it was, and then released it and went, okay, we found that there's nothing. And it was a generic video. It wasn't even, there was nothing controversial in it. And then they released it after it had run its course. I were like, now we'll monetize it. And I was like, all right, I know how this game's getting played. This channel is going to be for the love, folks. It ain't going to be for the money. That's for sure. But yeah, so that was an interesting piece. And I'm curious to know if anybody had gotten an opportunity to see the video I put out yesterday. It's actually a video that I put out before. In the initial days of me starting to really embrace Article 5 and really starting to kind of like understand what it was and how powerful it is, and the frustration of nobody knowing about it, and or people knowing about it but knowing all misinformation, freaking out and thinking it was going to kill the world. And like, I had reached out to my Convention of States district captain here by me in California, and she had reached out to me afterwards. I went to a couple events, things like that. She had reached out to me at one point and asked me to make a video for them to help them recruit veterans. That their veteran numbers were lower than they'd like, and they wanted to try and increase that. So she asked if I could put together some sort of video. And I put this video together. It's about 8 minutes long. It's music behind it. I paid a narrator to do it. He's an Army veteran and a cause supporter, actually. Found him on Fiverr, and he went ahead and did the narration for me. And to this day, when I watch it, like I don't know about you folks, because I know some people are so jaded about the military-industrial complex and everything else that, you know, there are moments where, you know, they can't feel that feeling that I guess that I get when I watch these things. And it basically just breaks down, you know, number one, it breaks down the glory of our military history, and like starting with George Washington. This is all with imagery, starting with George Washington, and goes through each war that our military has fought. Well, most of them anyway. I left out like the French, the Spanish, French, whatever. I left out some stuff, but most of the major wars that we've been in were caught in here, and then it breaks down, you know, the battle that we're in now, and it breaks down, you know, starting with Khrushchev famously saying, you know, one day, you know, you will all be living under socialism, you know, and goes all the way through to, you know, how the indoctrination started, some clips from Yuri, you know, and things like that. And so if you don't know who Yuri is, that's Yuri. If you don't know who Yuri is, you need to go YouTube Yuri Bezmenov and check him out. But Yuri's the KGB propaganda expert who used to teach college courses. There's a famous interview with him in 1984 explaining ideological subversion, and how the KGB and the communist Soviets, you know, were strategically rotting us away from within. And so it's a very good watch. I would definitely check that out. But the video goes on to break it all down and then kind of brings it back up, you know, to how we fight back, right? And I think anyone who's familiar with the channel knows, you know, there's only one way. There's only one way. You know, I had people responding to that video yesterday and starting to hit me with the classic, you know, America's a corporation. I got all of them yesterday. One of them was, you know, the Britain still, you know, owns America, and, you know, there's the Rothschilds and Illuminati and the Masons and all of this stuff that I now, not that I consider some of it's nonsense, but a lot of it, you know, I understand that there's an element of truth to quite a bit of that. And the point that I try to make to people is, look, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if, you know, it doesn't matter if the Illuminati is still out there. It doesn't matter if the Masons are satanic. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters. It's not like it's irrelevant, but the point is, you know, America's a corporation. The Fed, is private company and owns this. BlackRock. All of this stuff is like, I guess it's important to know, but once you know it, like once you do get it, it doesn't matter, because in the end, whether or not, even if you wanted to make the argument that all of our founders, right? Because everyone uses that classic George Washington painting in a Freemason uniform and act like the Masons didn't need him more than he needs the Masons. That was one of those deals where, like, it was a marketing move and it was a brilliant one. But if you think, Washington, for that many years, all the key years of his life was like focused on Masonry, like Freemasonry. I mean, it just wasn't. And that was a club they were all in and whatever. Just wanted that painting done so they could let it go, hang it up in their 33rd degree, whatever, and pretend that that he was this devout Mason. But in the end, even if the Masons were the ones who really wrote the Constitution and all that, or the Illuminati, or pick your wealthy family, right? Or secret group, right? Skull and Bones, whatever. The Constitution still is what it is. It still is what it is, and Article 5 still is what it is. And when you look at our history, as many people think that we did not, or we do not, adhere to our Constitution, I would argue that we do. And for the most part, we always have. Now, slight variances here and there, but for the most part, where things have gone wrong have been gathered around the Supreme Court. And it's that 3,000 page. When I say they're following the Constitution, what I'm saying is, they're following the annotated version of the Constitution, which has all of the previous Supreme Court decisions in it. So with that Constitution, understanding that is how the government runs, and as angry as it makes all of us to hear that Constitution even exists, the reality of the matter is it's those pages in that Constitution that need to start getting torn out until it starts looking more like the Constitution that you put in your pocket. Because a lot of those decisions, and those are the pages that will get ripped out, have gradually, right? Just like these Marxists want to get your kids. Gradually, subtly, over time, piece by piece, death by 1,000 cuts, they've given the federal government jurisdiction and immense powers that when you go back and you look at that Constitution that you have in your pocket, and you're like, well, wait a minute. I'm looking at this 10th Amendment, and it says nothing that's not outlined here in this Constitution is a power to the federal government. That all goes to the states. But then why are they controlling education? There's nothing in here that talks about education. Well, wait a minute. Why are they controlling work safety? When did they get that authority? You could go on and on. You could go on and on. And all of it comes down to subtle, often misinterpreted, but always interpretable decisions by the Supreme Court over the course of that century. Now, for those of you who are learned in civics, right, meaning you taught yourself, because certainly schools never taught you, and assuming that you took on that task and you understand how the Constitution works, then you know that there's only one way to overturn a Supreme Court decision. Only one. And the thing is, and that's by amending the Constitution, right? When the left wanted to impose income tax, the courts would say no repeatedly. Now, yes, we did impose an income tax during the Civil War, but it was necessary because the Union would have fallen apart if it were not funded, and then it wouldn't matter because then Britain would have just taken all the rich people's money anyway. But in the end, What ended up happening is as soon as the war ended, it got shut down again because it's unconstitutional, or at least it was. And for decades, they tried to get this across until finally they got the right mix of doot-da-doos and coconuts and were able to freaking pull it off under the threat that if they didn't do it, they would have to raise tariffs immensely. And the people gave in, many of whom didn't even pay attention because the taxes were promised to only be on the wealthiest of the wealthy. Sound familiar? Right? Until slowly it graduated down. But it didn't matter now. Now the government had the power to income tax, and it didn't make a difference. And the rest was history, right? The Fed was born shortly after, or right in the same timeline, and we all know the history from there. Well, what if we repealed that? What if we repealed that 16th Amendment? I'd like to see the 17th go too, but it's another subject. What if we repealed that 16th Amendment? How would we do that? Would the government ever do it? Do you think the government, I don't care, let's put Trump in the presidency, or maybe like DeSantis, put him, whoever you want in the presidency. Let's fix the Congress up with all the favorite candidates that conservatives like, and put everybody in their place. You think we could repeal the 16th Amendment? I don't think so. I think they would laugh. I think everyone right up to Trump would laugh. And I don't know what Trump's position personally would be, but I don't think any of them would be okay with it. I don't. Maybe you scatter few in Congress. Some in Congress would be in favor of it. A majority, I don't know. But anyway, the first hurdle would be I just painted a fictitious scenario. It's never going to happen. So, and in the end, without that unicorn moment, it'll never happen. And the reality of the matter is, none of these things will happen. Term limits will never happen. No fiscal restraints, no balanced budget will ever happen. We're past all that. We're at a point that the founders knew we would get to. It's not even like we let them down. I think they just knew, inevitably, by nature, government does one thing. It grows exponentially. And it always grows on the same concept, on the promise of fruits and safety. Right? That's always how it grows. And as it grows and gets bigger, it becomes more nefarious and more nefarious. And the next thing you know, poof, it's all gone. Well, that's not okay. It's not okay to just sit back and say, well, we gave it a good shot, right? We gave it a good run. Well, maybe you're the one who's saying, well, I'm just locked and loaded. And, I got some family members who kind of, talk like that, some extended family. And like, I know a lot of people who talk that way, and some of them may even mean it, but like in the end, revolution is a disaster. So that is an avenue that like needs to be avoided at almost every front, right? Unless it's down to the point where the boots are on the necks and stuff like that. All right, then people will probably do whatever, but it ain't at that point. We're not there. We're not at a point of soldiers coming into houses. Well, not in the military law type of deal, right? So we're not in that advanced stage yet. And the fact of the matter is, everything that we need to correct can be corrected via amendment. And the three topics that are on the board right now, any reasonable amendment that comes out on those topics, I would like to think will be ratified. Because whoever doesn't ratify it from the state legislatures, the federal government has no involvement. They're not even relevant. This is strictly amongst us and our local legislatures, right? So in the meantime, as we get from 19 states to 34, you should be paying attention to your local legislature. Forget these doo-doo-doos in Congress. They don't care about you. They don't care about you. And no matter who wins the presidency, they can't do anything to help you. They just don't have the power. So knowing those two things, right? Trump went in. It's not like his heart wasn't in the right place, but he just couldn't get anything done. I mean, there's certain things that you could do, but in the end, what still existed? How easy was it to tear down everything he did? Right? I guess that's a good way to put it. How easy was it for Biden to just walk in and tear it all down? In a year, 2 years, we were in an abyss. Because presidents don't have that kind of power. On the foreign stage, okay. They have power on the foreign stage. But domestically, he can't shut down the Board of Education. He's not going to shut down, the EPA. And I mean, it's not going to have OSHA, right? What are they? Health and Human Services, right? All of that could be consolidated into like a 5-room office with like 10 people working in it. But the president's not going to do that. We can, though. We can. And that's incredibly empowering. And I just want to, I want to put this in perspective. If you don't know what the 3 topics are, okay, it's term limits for all government officials. So if you're that dude who's like, we have term limits, they're called elections. Nobody elects the deep state guy, right? Nobody elects the creepy dude with the little thing in his ear, does the black budget, keeps the aliens in their cages. Nobody elects that guy. That guy's just below the top guy. The director of the CIA, the head of Homeland Security. It's the guy right below them. He's the guy that when the new director, the new head comes in, all right, here's how it works. Sit down. We're going to go over this. We got 2 days. And I start breaking everything down. And then the next puppet, does whatever they're supposed to do. That guy, term limits, right? Then you got fiscal restraints, right? A balanced budget amendment, that's a given. That will easily, I can almost, if there's any one of the amendments, I mean, term limits for sure, but any one of the other amendments under the other 2 categories that will be proposed and almost certainly amended and almost certainly brought in and ratified would be the balanced budget amendment. Because it's just so damn common sense. And it would probably be the most directly impacting one on the country. Because everyone, even conservatives, like their programs. And they don't like to admit it. They don't like to admit, until it's their program that gets affected. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, settle down. I mean, we want some cuts, but you don't got to cut that, and the reality of the matter is there's going to be some major restructuring going on, to fit our budget and make it salvageable. But that being said, it's necessary. And there is an adult that needs to walk in the room and be like, what the hell? And start cutting up the credit cards and putting together a strategy to get off the Fed tit and get back into a position of strength, right? So there's that, right? And so there's fiscal restraints, and then there's government overreach, mostly addressing, in my vision anyway, mostly addressing things like regulatory agencies being used by the executive as a workaround from Congress, shutting most of them down because they're just not necessary and can be handled individually by the states. These are the things that will get addressed. Maybe with any luck, the 17th Amendment turned over on the government overreach topic. With any luck, that might happen. I mean, there are some privacy things that I'd like to see go in there. And, Mike Arnold actually, who is now the regional director in the North, at least a portion of the Northeast, New York, was it New York, New Jersey, if you play Philadelphia, maybe. Mike, I don't know. You can list it off. I know you're watching. I saw you on there. But I was going to try and pull a link from him, but it's going to be too distracting to pull it up now. But there's a link on Convention of States. Mike, maybe you could post the link in the comments, and then I'll put it in all the comments, and that so people could check it out. There's going to be a simulation done in August, and I'm going to be covering this with Mike pretty extensively. And when the simulation is going on, they're actually going to make proposals. They're going to iron stuff out, debate. There's people going representing every state. It's going to be an incredible lesson in civics. I highly recommend that you dial in for that. Certainly, you will get more information when you're done signing the petition. And you can see the link for the petition from my website, www.thepatriotthinktank.com. Convention of States, or you can just put /COS and it'll take you right there. There's a link for signing the petition that will take you to Convention of States website, where there you can volunteer, you can sign the petition. They'll send an email to your legislator, letting them know that you are interested or you are supporting the calling of a convention of states. Also on my website, you can see what states are in, what states are out, where your state is, read the resolution that your state's either proposing or has passed. So a lot of good information there. There's a PragerU video explaining convention of states for those who have, who really just have no idea how it works. So there's a lot of stuff that you can get of value there, but in the end, right, when you go there and you sign up, you'll get an alert for when when all these events go down, and that's kind of cool, right? You'll get the email that says, "Hey, the simulation's going down." Right? Follow Convention of States. It's Convention of States Project on YouTube and Facebook. They also have a MeWe page, so follow them there as well, just to stay up to date when breaking stuff happens. We still have states out there ready to pop this year, so we're trying to keep the ear close to the wall, right, to make sure we know what's going on. That's a good place to get the head start. But there's a link where you can go. I think you have 2 more days to be able to do this. You can go in. I did it already. I proposed 5 amendments. You go in there and they basically take your suggestions as to what you think a proper amendment would be, and it has to be germane to the topic, right? So you've got to be on topic with term limits, fiscal restraints, or government overreach. But there's also, you can't throw stuff in on the border and things like that. It's got to be on those 3 topics, right? So there's a lot of, I say that specifically because there's a lot of things that people would like to see, get built in, and it doesn't, you'd have to call another convention for that. But that brings me to another point, right? Is that, let's say, the convention gets called, delegates, commissioners, right, are selected by the states. They're sent off to the convention. They iron out some proposals, in the language and whatnot, vote on it, approve it. It heads back to the states for ratification, and 38 states, which is the 3/4 necessary, would ratify, some, but not others, and this and that, however it goes down, right? The real power in this, okay, the real power, and I might do a separate video just to make this point, is that the real power is the fact that the process gets completed. Because by completing the process, what happens is it removes all of the Soros groups. It removes all of the John Birch Society folks, the Publius Huldas, all of these coconuts out there who are trying to scare people out of their constitutional power and act like this convention is going to go wild. It's going to be a runaway convention. It's going to be all of those people will be done. The process will have completed. Convention of States will now not just be law and not just be, what it is now, a recognized part of the Constitution, but the process will be solidified. There will be no more debating on whether we should or shouldn't do it. We can stick to whether we need to do it or not. Because the argument that we don't need to do it is just ridiculous. So Mike Arnold has just popped up the link here for me. You'll see it in Facebook because that's where he put it. But I am going to send it out to everyone else. And I'm going to put it in the regular comment section. Let me just, of the Rumble channel. All right, so now all platforms have it. It should be on Facebook twice, actually. Rumble, YouTube, and Twitch. Everyone's got a link to the simulation page. There are watch parties that you can start. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can do. And I would encourage everybody to do that. Get the fellas together, have some beers, see if there's a local bar maybe you go to. I know the one I used to go to years ago in Queens, they had like a back room that everybody chilled in and stuff. Throw it on the TV there and just, hang out, have some beers, put it on the speakerphones so you can hear the debate. We've all been greatly deprived of civics, all of us. There's just no denying it. I don't care who I hear Trump, in a speech saying we need to save our democracy. And I'm just like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, why would you, a popular candidate, hell, the guy I'm probably going to end up voting for, why are you calling this a democracy? And I don't hate him for it because I know that the whole country's been damn brainwashed. And he grew up in that country. So how can I hate him for it? It doesn't mean that I don't get angry when it happens. Because I do. Like, you shouldn't be. I was looking to find DeSantis saying the same thing. I didn't find it yet. But if you know of DeSantis calling this a democracy, let me know. Because I will update. I did a compilation of people calling it a democracy and kept buzzing them out every time they did it, and then played an old school 50s clip of someone giving the tutorial on how this is not a democracy. And Trump was one of the ones. I was able to find one on Trump. I did not find one on DeSantis, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If you find one, I want to add him in there because I'm just making this point. We've all been deprived of civics, all of us. They took civic. If you are a late boomer or Gen X, you know social studies. You don't know civics. And looking back at it now, I know they taught me social studies. That's what was on. Like, I learned social studies. I didn't even though they had the little commercial with the bill, like I'm a bill. And they go through how a bill is. That's not a civics class. That's a cartoon. There are so many things to know that we don't know. Not only that we don't know, but that we've specifically been led to believe otherwise, like calling this a democracy. And then some people acting like they know are like, ha, 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 it's not a democracy. It's a democratic republic. And then I chew their face off and spit it out because it drives me insane. That people, it's like you take it from one level of dumb and then go to it's not even dumb, it's ignorance. You take it from ignorance and you move to stupidity. Because now you've made an active effort to understand that you got it wrong and you still got it wrong. that's where it moves into the realm of stupidity. And for those who are saying, I thought it was a democratic republic, it is a constitutional republic. So we've been deprived of civics. All of us, in some way, shape, or form. We know what we have taught ourselves. And if we didn't teach ourselves, being very wary of how much nonsense is out there, then even then we may get it wrong. And the amount of people who don't understand the way the country was originally designed to operate is wild. Is wild. Like a lot of this stuff I give passes for because, like I said, I understand that there was no civics. I get it. But now that we know there was no civics, like that should make you mad. Like having that bell go off that there are no civics, and not only are there no civics, but they intentionally replace that with social studies. Just listening to the name social studies should make you be like, oh my God. Like, I can't believe. But yeah. Because they don't want you to understand how the country works. And watching something like this simulation just opens a whole new door. If you take a look, right? And I've got videos on convention estates, some of which, take different angles to things that maybe you might see traditionally. Still in support, though. And then there's other places like Rob Nadelson's book, and there's the Convention Estates University, which I have a link to on the website as well. There's information out there that as you go down the journey, that start to learn it and start to realize that we've been doing it wrong for a long time, at least politically. That our focus has been in the wrong place for a very long time. And it's not that the president is not an important person. It's just that the presidential election is not the most important election, yet it's still the one election that the most people show up to, which tells you that most people don't understand how our government works. The elections that should matter to everybody are your local elections. First priority. First priority. Because if a president or Congress or whatever ever go rogue, the ones who are going to protect you are your local legislatures. And if you're not paying attention to who's getting put in those positions, well, you may very well find yourself not being protected at all. And the reason why they were designed in our system to be the most powerful, they were able to pull senators out of their seats. These are powers that the founders all gave to state legislatures. Why? Because they are the closest to the people. And this is why they alone run the process of calling a convention and ratifying amendments. Governors have no say. President has no say. None of those dootaroos have a say. Congress can just sit down and watch the people impose restrictions. And when it's done, and as I said earlier, we've demonstrated the process is finished. And this is where the simulation comes in, because you can watch what the process should look like. You can watch how the process runs. See the different debates, the calls to order, the attempts to do something that's not within the scope of what they're commissioned to do. You can sit and watch all of those things go down. And then, even before, hopefully before then, write that letter to your legislature. And I don't mean type one. They'll send an email on your behalf just for signing the petition. I'm talking about writing, like one technique that I learned from grassroots convention estates. And there are 5 million strong, spread out across the country. Every district in this country have grassroots from convention estates. But of course, we need more. 5 million is a lot, but there's some 300 million, 200 million adults. We need more. Hopefully everybody, because 2/3 of the population agree on the issues, dude. It's not even like, I mean, term limits, government overreach, and freaking fiscal restraints. I guarantee you, every Democrat that's sane, and but let's say they support RFK, right? Because those Democrats, we disagree on a lot of stuff, I'm sure, but those are the Democrats that understand. Like, those are the Democrats that didn't get vaccinated. Those are the Democrats that were like, stick your mask where you know. Like, there are Democrats out there who've done that. And those, but they still believe in abortion. They still believe in other trivial, not trivial, but, other significant divisive issues. But these issues are not divisive. So for once, let's just, if we don't get these issues corrected, the other stuff almost doesn't matter. If we don't get these issues corrected, these are the issues, these are the existential issues of our day. You could argue maybe abortion is, but like, I'm talking about save the country or not save the country. And in the end, these are the issues. Term limits, right? You can't have career politicians. You just can't have it. We know that now. We've known that for a long time. We impose term limits on the president for a reason. It needs to happen. We can't continue. In the video that I put out yesterday, which is more of a patriotic themed video, you had Rand Paul in there talking about, $28 trillion in debt. And that was 2 years ago that I originally did that video. I had to put in the update with the slide in saying it's actually at 32 million. And probably before this video is over, it'll be at 33. Right? But like, this is, these are issues we all agree on. And it's important that when we have those moments, when we have these issues that we can all agree on, that we cherish them and we do it. There's plenty of time to argue about unions and abortion and everything else. There's plenty of time to do that. But we need a nation that's standing upright in order to have those debates. If Marxists come in and take over, it's all done. Now, I don't believe they will. I don't think it's possible in the end. But do we want to keep living like this where they have the upper hand? Can we just put all that to bed? Shut down these regulatory agencies. Focus the federal government's power on foreign policy rather than strictly focused on domestic policy in every nook and cranny of our life. And Marxism will be impossible. It will be impossible, as it was designed to be, as the nation was designed to be. If we all understood civics for the last 50 years, 60 years, if we all understood it, we'd have never let this happen. We'd have never let it happen. But we did let it happen, and here we are. So now, having spent most of my life in leadership of some sort, there's one thing that I think every quality leader understands, and that's to never focus on things you can't control. Calling this convention, this is something we can control. I can tell you in your district, and obviously, we have viewers that at any time can be watching from anywhere, including internationally. So this wouldn't obviously apply to my Australian, New Zealand, UK folks and such. But to everybody inside the U.S., chances are your district, now I know I got a lot of peeps in New York and New Jersey. In most cases, your districts, your particular legislator can be swayed. Like, we're not talking you need millions of people to show up. Let me say this. If 1,000 people showed up, it would be like, oh my God. Like, you'd almost have the guy on the floor the next day demanding. But like, you don't even need 1,000. If you got 100, there are stories of 15 to 20 showing up. There's people that have jobs, and they know, they know that it's not, for 20 or 30 people, in the middle of the week to be able to just show up. They know that the activists in the streets, all these do-to-do activists, don't have jobs. When they see, Gen X showing up, they know they have jobs. They know that there's a concern here, right? If they're getting flooded with handwritten letters, who doesn't read a handwritten letter, right? Think about that just for a moment. If you go and get your mail and you see that there's a letter with a stamp on it that's handwritten and it's postage stamped, you're like, what the hell? And you open it up and the actual letter inside is handwritten. How many people don't read that letter? Just think about that, though. First of all, how many other letters? Does that letter now stand out, right? How many other people took the time to sit down and handwrite a letter? Because unless there's crossouts all over it, they know that you had some errors and you had to cross it out, rewrite it. Like, there's work that goes into writing a handwritten letter. And because there's work in it, people respect it more. Right? So you go ahead and you sign the petition, you click volunteer, wherever district you're in around the nation, that district captain is going to reach out to you. And they're going to let you know how to get involved. First, they're going to want you to get educated, but let's assume you get through that process. You educate yourself, you know your stuff, you're ready to go, right? Now you can go out and start teaching other people, right? And teaching other people, you teach one person, now that person goes and teaches a person, right? You teach two people, now you got two people teaching, now there's four people, right? And it just expands that way. And as we all work together to educate ourselves and get ourselves on path, right? Get ourselves on path to the point where, now we've got 100, 200 people who have educated themselves. Or imagine 200 handwritten letters showing up at a state legislature when he's got, I don't know, 10,000 constituents, 5,000 constituents, some are as small as 3. 100 of them took the time to write a handwritten letter. And you get this flood, it's like Miracle on 34th Street. All these letters hitting your desk. Clearly, at that point that there's a move that needs to be made. Right? This is how grassroots work. This is how the grassroots work. And the one thing that I love watching those guys and listening to them talk about how they approach and how they do things, they're always encouraging grassroots, be respectful, right? These legislatures are made up of regular dudes, man. Like the state legislatures, these are not career politicians. They're not career politicians. These people, I know because I listen to them, because over the last 2 years, I've been watching a ton. Every time it comes up in front of a committee, every time it comes up in front of some house from chamber from one of the states that are listening to it, and the debates are going on. Like, I'm listening to all the back and forth, and you'll be surprised how many times. There's one episode I play it. There was one session where I play the video for it all the time, because I just think it makes that point. I don't know if I can I'm trying to find it. I don't know if I will, though. There's so much stuff in here. Actually, I think I did. So here's Mark Meckler talking to one of the state legislatures, and listen to the response that he gets. He gets caught out there. He makes a mistake, and he says, you do politics for a living, I do this for a living, and he gets corrected on the you do politics for a living thing real quick.
You do politics for a living, and politics are...
I'm a farmer. I'm a farmer.
How about not for a living?
I'm a statesman. Senator Craig and I are statesmen.
I appreciate that. You are...
Right? So he says, you do politics for a living. He's like, I'm a farmer. And that's the situation. And he didn't say it meanly, but, they were joking about it. But he did correct him. Like, he did make sure he corrected him. Like, I do not do this for a living. Like, I don't feed my family by showing up here. We're statesmen. We're here for public service. And you will find when you listen to more and more. Now, I'm not saying in no state legislature anywhere is there an aspiring lifetime politician. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is the vast majority of these state legislatures outside of the lost cities like New York and LA, the vast majority, or lost states like New York and California, the overwhelming majority of state legislatures, some of them don't even meet every year. So it's, and I think it was New Hampshire, they get paid like $100 a session. The salary was set in the 1700s, and they just never gave themselves a raise. So that's the other extreme. But even on the other side of it, these are regular folks, right? And they come in respectfully, and when they're asked to do things, when they're asked, some of them say to themselves straight out, when you're asked to, I was talking with one of my constituents. Here was one. He says, I had a constituent approach me and say, I want to have tea. Would you just take some time out of your day to have some tea with me? And I know tea. It was like, hey, it's America. We do coffee. But anyway, so he says, you know what? But he asked me if I could find time to have a cup of tea just so he could talk to me about this and let me listen with an open mind. And all that he said, he sat down with the guy. And the guy gave him some information, probably Nadelson's book, but he gave him some information. I was like, look, he asked him, where do you stand on convention of states? And the legislator said, well, honestly, I've been against it. I've been pretty opposed to it. But to be truthful with you, I don't really know, the guts of it. I don't really know the ins and outs of it. And what he's saying there is that, and I'm not going to speak for him, but what it sounded like to me was, look, I got this guy from John Birch Society handed me a DVD. I watched it, and it scared the crap out of me, and I don't want to friggin' vote for it. So he told him, he said, yeah, honestly, I'm not that learned in it. So the guy gives him some materials. And he's telling this story on the House floor because he wants to make the point that, after years of voting against this, now that this one constituent who convinced me to read, and I'm a man of my word. He said, I promised him that I would read on the topic. And he's like, and lo and behold, once I did, I'm now the sponsor of the resolution to call for a convention of states. And this story goes on from legislature to legislature because they're regular folks, right? These are not, people go, oh, well, they should know this. It's not a requirement to be a scholar to be in a state legislature. It's a requirement to get elected. And, once you're there, these are not idiots. It's not like they're in the corner playing with their lip. Not a lot of people don't know the ins and outs of Article 5 because it's never been used before. But they're so honest when they talk about this. All of these bill sponsors, South Carolina came over last year after years of not wanting to come over for years, and finally they came over. And there's actually, and again from their angle, and there's another clip where they say it straight out. And I kept these clips because they were powerful to me, because they told the story of how these states, why it's moving so slowly. All right. And if you say, well, we got 19 states already, what do you mean it's moving slowly? It's been going on for like 10 years. And we got 4 states last year. So, and we might get another 2 or 3 this year, but like in the end, in Kansas, we got the vote, but they got some weird provision for supermajority. So they may end up being number 20. But when you listen to these two guys explain how they came to support it.
Again, I studied myself from being opposed initially to being supportive because I saw how significant the framers considered this to rebalance the power between the federal and the state government, and they were very, very committed to balanced political power, not excessive political power.
I also came around. I was against the Convention of States, but I have also, after reading and reading and reading, I have become convinced that you're absolutely correct.
Right? And that story, that tale between those two. Rocky Lane, how are you over in Thailand, sir? So there we go. I was telling you, we got some international folks. Rocky's like, yep, I'm one. But those two guys were typical of states that were, all 4 states last year had people had legislators in them who were in that same stance. And what I tell people when they give me the deep state's going to take it over, we are at a point. I'm going to speak to you the way President Trump spoke to the black voter. At this point, what do you have to lose? Runaway convention compared to an existing runaway government. Knowing that this power is yours, knowing that the states are not going to let it go Ori. Like every state treasures its own sovereignty. It is not easy to get an amendment ratified. It is not easy. You are not going to see coconut amendments coming out of if they don't think it's going to get ratified, they're not going to waste their time. These people have lives too. And they're not going to spend endless hours debating over nonsensical material. Now, can we put it past people like California and New York to specifically send in some Soros cronies to try and, muck it all up? Sure. But so what? Let them get knocked out of order and move on. They ain't going to be able to. The majority of the states that go in there are going in with a purpose. And the federal government will be shaking in its boots. And when it's over, regardless of what gets amended and what's not, maybe you're of the position of, you know what, the border. If we can't have the border in it, I don't want to. Maybe that's your position because the border is your most important issue. It certainly is a very big one. But understand, once this convention ends, it's not like it's not like all of us who got that convention called, who fired up our state legislators to get that convention called. We don't just disappear. We don't just disappear. We could call another one. Heck, we could do it simultaneously. We wouldn't. We'd want one to end. But the point is, we could say, look, here, federal government, we know that it's written in the Constitution that you are responsible for our borders, but you have been neglectful and you have not protected our borders and you are putting the entire nation in jeopardy. We don't care why. But if you don't get it corrected, we are going to correct it. And if they ignore you, well, then you start passing resolutions. And as soon as they start seeing that happen, I guarantee you the National Guard will be on the border the next day. I guarantee you. I don't care who's president. Once the muscle gets flexed, once they realize that we can just take power from them, that it's not easy, but it's very easy if everybody's in agreement. It's very easy if it's a nationally understood situation. Getting a border amendment, should we need it after this convention is called, like, I don't even think you'll need to even get one state resolution passed. I think the mere conversation of starting another convention off the success of the first one to get the border corrected, like, Americans are going to be empowered to a point where you're going to have people wanting to call conventions when there are serious issues, they can be called. 250 years from now, all right, if we propose and ratify the type of game-changing amendments that we need, it will be talked about 250 years from now. I joke with the folks at Convention of States when I talk to them about, like, when you take photos, if you're at these events, if you're at some, letter writing event, or, maybe it's a table at a fair where you're trying to get signatures, or maybe, wherever it may be, I'm like, if there's someone from Convention of States Action or press or wherever taking your picture, you need to make sure you give them your good side, because you may very well be showing up in some textbook 250 years from now, you're going to be like that like those pictures they show you now, except ours, now we're going to 250 years looking back, it's going to have some decent photography. You want to be in that picture, you better be looking good. Get your best Star Spangled Banner shirt on. All right, folks. So I'm good for today. Let me see what we got in the comments. If anyone has a question about Article 5, how would it impact this? How would it impact that? Let me know. I will. Let me see here. So Rocky is saying, yeah, so true. The state legislation are almost like you and I. Yeah, they are. They are you and I. They are you and I. And that's, and that's the, and then Rocky's listening from Thailand. Let me see what we got here. Rocky says if he's fully awake. Yes, you are, Rocky. Yes, you are. And I think Rocky was trying to start his own channel, if I remember, some time ago. But the bottom line is, yes, we must stand together, and that's why all of this stuff, like I started with the show and I started talking about, the pedophiles in the Gay Men's Chorus at the time that they did that video, and talking about how they mock, coming after your children, and like all of these, like they're all minions, right? They're all minions who are carrying out actions they don't even know they're carrying out for the purposes they are. Like if you tell these people, look, what you're doing is just, all you're doing is trying to split up families, even though you don't think that's what you're doing. Even though you don't think that you're a part of trying to drive a wedge between children and their parents and bring those children closer to the state. We know that you think that's crazy, but by the time you figure it out, it's over. It's over. And that's not something we're willing to wait for, right? But this is what they do. They divide. They divide. So, be diligent, folks. Be diligent. I'm going to be on next week. I will have some information. I will have seen Sounds of Freedom by then. If you have not seen Sounds of Freedom, I highly recommend the movie. I know Norm earlier was saying he didn't enjoy it, but I've heard from like 10 people right now. He's number 11, and all other 10 were like, this is a must see. So let's see. I'm going to go in objectively, but if it is good, I'm going to be fired up. So you can get ready for that next week. If that movie is tight, like Nefarious, I didn't know what to expect when I went in to see Nefarious. I saw that in the movies, and it was so powerful. I went in and I saw it with my daughter. I came home and was dying because I couldn't stream it anywhere. And it finally came out stream ready, and it was like $19.99 to stream, at least initially. I don't know what it is now, but at first I was like, $20, man, to rent it? I'm like, no. And that was to rent it. But then I came back, I was like, I really want to watch this movie. So eventually my daughter was like, she wanted to watch it too. And I gave him another 20, because to me, it was like, you know what? Support these guys, right? Like clearly they don't have the machine working behind them to promote the movie. Like it was around where I am in California. It's not all over. It wasn't all over California, but it was, I went to Jersey to visit my family, and I was there with my brother, and I'm like, dude, you want to go to the movies? Like, here's a reason to go back to the movies. Let's go to the movies. And we could not find a theater from Old Bridge, New Jersey, or any of the surrounding areas that were playing it. So I don't know, what kind of distribution this is getting, but good movies are making a comeback here, folks, and we should be paying attention. We should be paying attention. So this movie, I know I mentioned it earlier, but in case it's a different crowd on now, this Sounds of Freedom is about, it's a true story about a guy who wanted to help with the, help solve some of this child trafficking nonsense, and went to the government for help, was told it's not a priority, and then went and did it himself. There's obviously much more to it than that. I'm just giving you the quick break, but this is, it looks like a phenomenal movie. I tried to play the trailer. I wasn't ready for it. I may do the trailer for the intro next week, since I will be talking about it one way or the other. whether I loved it or thought it fell a little flat. But we'll see, because that's what it's all about. All right. So on that note, folks, I will see you next week. Hope everybody had a happy 4th. I'm out.